a lot of those provisions from the American Rescue Plan are sunsetting.
Yeah, March 1st, SNAP benefits and the expanded SNAP benefits for 32 states, DC, Guam, and elsewhere. And during COVID, those enhanced emergency protections for SNAP, I mean, it's estimated they kept at least 4 million people from falling below the poverty line. And the enhanced benefits helped 31 million Americans. With this like sharp reduction, there was this big write-up in the Washington Post as well, where they interviewed people in Kentucky, I believe, just essentially saying the government's trying to kill me, because the guy who they interviewed to open the piece, he was getting a check in the hundreds, and then it's in the double digits just immediately because of that cutoff. The average recipient's going to get $90 less of SNAP benefits now that this has fallen off. Family of four,
a month.
A month, yeah. Family of four will be cut over $320 a month, and the most drastic number, this is from Alex Salmon's write-up in Slate, seniors could see their benefits drop from $281 a month to just $23 a month. And what's also notable here, too, is that the Republicans have really struggled to find what they're going to hold the entire United States economy hostage over now that they have the House, when the debt ceiling fight kind of comes around the bend in June. And the only thing they seem to be able to agree on is SNAP cuts.
Right.
SNAP is a popular program when you ask people, and when it comes to polling, people want there to be some sort of safety net for the poorest Americans in the country. And this is just an example of like some of these things during the COVID emergency bills, like the child tax credit and expanded SNAP. Those should have been made permanent. And for a variety of reasons, including people like Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema and the Biden administration's lack of willingness to really fight on some of this stuff, that's not what's happened. But child poverty reduced drastically. SNAP, these expanded benefits, reduced poverty by 10%, child poverty by 14%, according to studies. And there's like lobbying efforts as well by some of these grocery stores that service SNAP recipients a lot as well. So there's industry push on that side too. But the problem is just that the Republicans in particular are ideologically opposed to helping any poor people.
And we should say 18 states have already reduced those benefits. So there was two types of benefits there. There was an increase in payments and also an expansion of who was eligible. And so there's going to be people who are kicked off totally and people who are going to have these reductions. And these are basically all just policy choices. We talk about earned income tax credit, the child tax credit, $300 per kid, per family on a monthly basis. And you combine that with the expansion of food stamps, you had, cut child poverty by 50% approximately. And then we just decided as a country, interesting to know that we could do that if we wanted to in the course of a year. Interesting to know that we could do that. Now that we know, whatever. I mean, the total lack of outrage about this is reflected in our media, as reflected by our politicians, as reflected by, most people just don't think about it. Maybe they saw that stat. And then we just decided, whatever.
Manchin says that, at least with the child tax credit, the reason he didn't want it to continue is because people would use it for drugs. That was his reasoning behind that.
The sense of entitlement.
I mean, there is a certain class of power broker in Washington that enjoys a certain level of child poverty or poverty amongst the population for exploitation. That is a fact.
It's maintained. It's the whip.
It is just... People really need to internalize this. We have proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that we have the ability to reduce child poverty by about 50% over the course of a year. I mean, probably less, 6 to 8 months, 6 months. We did it. Not hard to figure out how you would sort of like double that number. And then just as a society, we decided, understand that these are all policy choices. Period. End of story. They are all policy choices. And it's not even like a this or that type of choice. I don't love the idea that we're sending a ton of money to the military industrial complex, but don't kid yourself. The reason why we're not eradicating child poverty is because we don't care. Or there may be some people who are like, it's like Matt said, it keeps wages down. It keeps wages down.
Right.
It keeps people, a little bit of hunger keeps them in line.
I think that's why the Koch brothers are so, and those sorts of oligarchs have put so much money into like this narrative that we responded to the COVID pandemic with just an authoritarian overreach of the government, because there are certain things like this that we did. And Adam Tooze covers all this stuff too. The intervention in the economy that actually like proved these things that we're talking about, that we can just change this stuff.
Everything we talk about too is you start to realize it's all about setting a precedent. They're not fighting against a specific policy per se. They are fighting against the idea that we can that these things don't have to exist. Mm-hmm. They're fighting against the idea that the American public would realize, like, we're just making a choice. These are all political choices. There is no economy. There is only a political economy. There is no economy that exists in nature. There is only the economy that we decide to make. And they don't want people to understand that. Also, and it's not just like a Koch brothers. Do you have that Nate Silver tweet? That was a perfect example. Do you have that tweet? I sent that in the chat. It's the perfect example of how like they deploy and folks like the data guys, how they
sort of centrist guys.
Yeah. I think Atrios had it actually at one point. Maybe he didn't. I can't remember where. Right, well, I think I saw it. But the point is, he wrote, there was some guy on Substack, of course, who wrote something to the effect of like, the authority, okay, yes. And do you have his tweet on that?
I'll find the tweet. This is the...
Yeah, let's find the tweet, because he is commenting on this piece written in September. Santa Clara churches were still prohibited. This is 2020. From indoor gatherings. Yet by contrast, shopping malls could operate at 50% capacity. By October 14th, when the county churches were allowed the lesser of 100 people or 25% capacity, museums could run at 50%. Stores had no capacity limits on them at all. Much of Santa Clara's restrictions early on were tied to state requirements, which were harsher on churches than stores. Now, Nate Silver, the data guy, is out there saying like, oh, well, this is a clear indication of like of the type of person who is writing this. In fact, I think he even says
I have it here.
There's no epidemiological reason in why this existed. I mean, it's sort of stunning in the sense that Nate Silver, here it is. It's kind of crazy and tells you a lot about who was writing the restrictions, right? This is the narrative. Those smug secularists. That churches in some jurisdictions were subject to more restrictions than museums! Exclamation point. Not even attempting to follow any sort of epidemiological principles. What are the statistic odds that Nate Silver has never been into a church and never been into a museum and never been into a shopping mall? Because my experience in all three of those places, and to be fair, I don't go into churches too often, is that when you're in church, you're sitting in one place. There's usually somebody, if, people like the rabbi or the priest or the pastor, whose shoulder can touch yours in the pew, and you're sitting there for an hour or 2 hours or 2.5 hours. Nobody's moving around. And you know what else they're doing? They're singing. They're singing right in your face. Or they're praying out loud right in your face. Now, at a museum, generally, people sometimes stop, look at a painting to take it all in, but you're moving around. You're standing. The ceilings are much higher.
It's also a little untoward to be singing loudly in a museum.
They tell you not to sing so much. 50% capacity in a museum. This is a pretty nice experience, actually, because you're not running into many people.
I also love his.
You also have the ability to
yeah.
step aside from them. Same with a mall. You're moving around. I mean, how do you say attempting to follow any sort of epidemiological principles? Close proximity, no huge, exalting of air from your body.
Also, people go to church are old. That's another thing. Like that, they're tighter packed and they're older. I would imagine. I mean, people.
And we had a
museums are old
lot of
too.
examples early on of like mass infections in church. But the point being, Nate Silver's, sort of like part of this sort of libertarian.
But we know this. Like, I mean, it's the same way. Like FTX was reading these guys. They know who their big readers are.
Yeah. Yep.
I mean, but who is he trying to say that who tells you a lot about who was writing the restrictions? I mean, Nate
non-religious people.
I understand. It's like look at these smug liberals.
Hoity-toity elite.
But Nate Silver came out of the New York Times. The readers.
Nate Silver came out of Daily Kos.
I mean, give me a break.
He was
here.
pro Blomno.
Him and Matt Iglesias really remind me of, the middle of the country, normal type of guys.
Yeah, totally in touch with the heartland. Like, I don't even know who he's trying to appeal to here, but I guess I do. Right?
Yeah,
like, let's
it's
not
oligarchs.
pretend who you are.
It's like the Joe Rogan businessmen type of guys who think that really changed my mind about universal basic income because people need an incentive to work. That's the class of people this is speaking to.
With the trappings of, I'm going to attack liberal elitism.
Yeah,
Exactly. All right.
Oh, and I just want to say quickly about the SNAP thing. Next time Republicans talk about how hard it is to get a gallon of milk in this country right now and what the prices are, know that they are ideologically opposed to any kind of government program that prevents people from getting hungry or starving. They pretend like they're trying to combat inflation, and that's because they really care about the every worker and their inability to buy a carton of eggs when they're ideologically in line with letting you starve. The obsession with inflation is really just about the investor class and things like debt becoming a little bit less valuable for holders that they represent.
Kowalski said, a very cruel read I had on why they want to cut back on the SNAP program so much is that it will decrease the demand for food and bring prices down. Let that sink in for a moment. We will starve the poorest among us to get the cost of food down.
Jeez.
Very possible. Well, we started the show by saying we're going to do a short Tuesday, and we managed not to do that. So,
I mean, I don't even know why you tell me that, because it never happened. It's never happened once, not once.
I used to be better about it. Because Michael would just like scour, like glare at me.
You might get that call.
To wrap it up.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll get a libertarian call now at 12:35 or 2:35.